Hey there, this is attorney Sarah Holmes of Holmes Business Law PC. We are talking today about employee handbooks. Maybe why would you need one? How could you get one in place in your business? And when would be the best time to implement an employee handbook? So there's a lot of things to consider with a handbook. One is that if you have more than a handful of employees, we normally tell people once you get to about 5 employees or more, you should really have an employee handbook in place. The reason for that is now you should have certain standards for employees, certain rules in place, and the handbook is a really nice and neat place for all of those to live. One of the best ways that you can protect yourself as an employer from things like discrimination lawsuits is to have a proper place where your policies are written down, and you could point to them and say, no, this was our policy. Our discipline or our firing of you was not discriminatory because right here in black and white are the policies that you didn't follow. If you don't have those in place, it becomes more difficult for you to argue that someone violated a policy if it's just not written down, right? So having a handbook gives you a place to have policies live, rules live, codes of conduct for employees, all kinds of things can go in a handbook. And that's typically where you want to do them. Now, if you have a handbook drafted after you've already hired employees, you're going to have some legal issues in terms of those employees being bound to the handbook. And what do I mean by that? What I mean by that is really when you hire your employees and let's say you give them an offer letter and you outline the rate of pay and their job duties, any benefits or policies you want them to follow, that's what you gave them when you hired them, and that's the assumption that they're operating under when they accepted the job with you and when they started performing your job. If you now later, after they've been hired for some period of time, give them a handbook and expect them to sign off on that and be bound by those policies, you're really changing the terms and conditions of their employment. So an employee can say, hey, those aren't the same terms and conditions under which you hired me. I'm not really bound to that. And if there's a problem later, they might be able to say, no, I never agreed to that. I'm not bound by that. So it makes really interesting legal arguments later on, especially if there are termination claims, discrimination claims. So you want to make sure that if you do go through the hassle of having a handbook drafted, that employees are actually going to be legally bound to it. How do you do that? Typically, if it's after you've hired the person for some period of time, like let's say you hire someone and 6 months later, you first have this handbook to give them. Now really you have to give them something of value in exchange for them signing off on and being bound to this handbook. So what does that have to be? Well, this is where it would be useful to consult with an attorney because it's really kind of on a case-by-case basis. It can't just be some marginal thing like, hey, let's have a pizza party. It can't be like, I don't know, $100 bonus if, their rate of pay, that really wouldn't be a significant bonus for them. It could be like a significant bonus. It could be a raise. It could be a promotion of some kind. And those are the types of things that you want to think about giving an employee in exchange for signing off on a handbook if it's far after when they've first been hired, right? The ideal situation is that you have the handbook ready when you first hire someone and they sign off on it from day one and then they're bound to it. But often that's not the case. Most people don't invest in the handbook until later. So if you do that, you do need to give them something of value in order to bind them to the handbook. So if you have questions about a handbook, if you have one that you need drafted for your business, you can reach out to our office. We will caution you that oftentimes payroll companies offer a handbook. We've looked at those handbooks, we've edited them for people. We find that in many times, those are really not properly customized to someone's particular business. And often that the employer doesn't even know what half the stuff is that went into that handbook. That's not a good thing. If you are employing people, you really need to know what it is you're asking your employees to sign off on. It's very, very important. That's why we would urge you to have your own custom handbook drafted for you. So feel free to reach out with questions, 215-482-0285. Thanks.
So the enemies, I'm taking them apart. I'm a young boss, got me feeling like a rock. They can never match it, they can never stop. Cause I've been really giving everything that I got.